I'm going to be speaking on creating systemic change through reconstructing masculinity. So we're going to speak about a variety of different things. I've got some slides. We're gonna go with it. We're going to be with each other for the next 45 minutes or so. And yeah, we're going to take our time with it and hopefully have some a good time along the way as well. All right. Can't hear properly. Perfect. If you can't hear at all, just let me know. But yeah, if not, then I will continue on. So I'm just seeing some of the comments popping up. So perfect. For anyone who is tuning in or listening in with a visual impairment, I would just quickly describe myself just so you have a bit of an idea of who I am. I'm a Black man in my early 30s. I'm wearing a navy jacket with a black t-shirt and a red baseball cap. And so, yeah, without further ado, I'm going to carry on. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get this thing moving. Perfect. There we are. I always have this fear that like as soon as I share my screen, something crazy is going to happen. So yeah, like I said, my name is Edmund. I'm just going to move this to the side because it's blocking my view. Perfect. So as Jennifer said, I am a speaker, presenter, filmmaker, and social entrepreneur. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I've been working in the space of social action and collective healing for the past 6 years. I started off working in men's mental health and well-being. I started in 2014, 2015, helping to combat the male suicide rate in the UK. And from there, I started getting deeper into systemic equality and social justice as a whole. So looking at the intersection of race, gender, sexuality, class, disability, etc. So I've been working in this space. I work alongside people who work in policy and legislation. My role is more in collective healing and social action. I'll get into that later on. And so, yeah, that is what I've been doing for the past 6 or 7 years. I've worked here in the UK and abroad as well, working with all different types of people from all different races, classes, backgrounds. And yeah, so it's been a great time, a very enlightening and illuminating time, I'd say as well, in good ways and not so good ways also. Perfect. So just a bit of an overview of what we'll be speaking about today. I'm going to start off sharing my personal story. I think that will give us a similar vantage point that we can all work from for the remainder of the time together. So I'm going to share a bit of my personal story, allow you all to kind of get a scope of how I've got to where I am now. And again, I think that will give us that will create a good, fertile launch pad for us carrying on in terms of looking at systemic inequality and looking at masculinity's role in that and how we can progress that to some degree. And so I think that'll be good. We'll then speak about systemic inequality, like I said, reconstructing masculinity. I'll share a short video, only about 2 or 3 minutes long, and then we'll do a Q&A. We'll do a Q&A, we'll get a little discussion going on, and it'd be good to hear from you all as well. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that as well. Feel free to grab a pen and a paper throughout the conversation if you want to write down some notes or things that come to your mind, any questions, comments, etc. Points of contention, it's, all are welcome. Or if you just want to sit back, relax, have a cup of tea and listen, that's all good too. Cool. Now, before we go on, I just want to ensure everyone that this is a safe space. Again, I'm highly interested in creating safe spaces for us as people to discuss, to debate, to engage. And so I want to show everyone that this is a safe space. Everything we share will stay within the confines of this Zoom call. Well, I say that it's being recorded, so actually probably it won't, but this is a safe space. So I can't necessarily guarantee that I'll stay within the confines of this, but the discussion won't be recorded like Jennifer said. So that will stay within that space, the discussion. This conversation, obviously, that I'm giving will obviously be going out to other people. I'm here to create a safe space. I'm not here to create a comfortable space. That is not on the cards. That's not on the menu. But I can assure you that you will be held. I'm holding this container for us. I will facilitate this to the best of my ability, and you will be safe. This will be a safe space. If at any point during the talk you need to get up for whatever reason, shift the energy, stand up, pop to the loo, grab a cup of tea, feel free to do that. If there's anything that I talk about that triggers you in any way, feel free to step away, turn the sound off, do whatever you need to do to best manage your energy, your mental and emotional well-being as well. So we're all here. And so, yeah, I will leave that for everyone to do and to monitor their own well-being. But please do make sure you're doing that. Cool. A quick question before we get going. Again, we're not going to answer this all together, but it's something that we could potentially look at when we have the discussion. The first question is, what would it look like for your industry to become more equitable? Now, obviously, Jennifer said that many of you are coming from the tech industry. So, for instance, what would it look like for the tech industry to become more equitable? And that can be from a variety of different spaces. Again, that could be race, gender, class, sexuality, etc. But think about that, as I speak for the next half an hour or so, and then in the discussion, perhaps we can share some of those answers that some of you all may have with that. So yeah, feel free to jot that down. What would it look like for your industry to become more equitable? Perfect. Now we're going to start out. This is where everyone goes, oh, you're so cute. And now I can't hear you. I'm imagining that you all are saying that. So this is the beginning of my story. I see you, Jennifer. Yes, so this is me. This is the young Daniel Edmund. For those who don't know, I was born here in Bristol, England. My dad is British. My mom's American. I was born in the UK. When I was about 4 or 5, my mom got homesick and we moved back to the States where she's from. She's from Washington, D.C. So I grew up just outside in the suburbs in Maryland for most of my life. And so growing up in the States in the early 90s was a really challenging time for me, actually. I was bullied all through school. I was bullied, and these conversations around masculinity, gender, race, and sexuality were kind of imposed on me from a very early age. I've not known a time in my life where those conversations haven't been had around me, to me, or about me. And so when I was young, I was bullied all through school for being a very effeminate kid. I've always loved having good conversation. I was very sensitive. And most of my friends were girls growing up because a lot of the guys thought I was gay and they didn't want to hang around me. So I was called a faggot, gay, you act like a girl, the whole thing, all the way up through school, literally. I've never known a time when I've not heard that or had people saying that about me in some way, shape, or form. And so at a very early age, I was very conscious of how I acted, how I conducted myself, and very conscious of these ideas around masculinity. I did not know what I was doing to invoke such harsh reactions from people around how I was acting, how I was being. And it was really challenging and confusing for me, because for me, I was just being myself. But every space I seemed to go in, people were labeling me a faggot, or people labeling me gay. And I didn't understand. At the time, I was like 4 or 5 years old. I was into Power Rangers. I wasn't into men, women, or any gender. I was into, like I said, Power Rangers and Disney. And so, yeah, it was very confusing for me, but it really started impacting my mental health. By the time I was 13, I tried to kill myself. And that was a really challenging point for me at that time. A year prior to that, I was sexually abused by a man that my family trusted. And so all of these different things had kind of culminated together and started to kind of reach a boiling point that by the time, like I said, I was 13, I did not want to be around anymore. It was that kind of that situation where, you don't want to live, but you're afraid to die. And so at 13, again, I did try to take my own life. And thankfully, that did not work. I'm still here. And I began progressing through things the best that I could. I had a conversation with myself when I was 13 and said, look, Daniel, we've got to shake ourselves out of it. And that's what I did. So at the time, I was 13 years old. I was shorter than I am now. I was a bit chubby, was getting really bad acne. The whole situation was quite dire, actually. And but I started working out, and I actually found out I had a really good talent for distance running. And so I actually became a 800-meter runner in high school. And that was from the ages of 14 to 19. And that was my life for a good amount of time. And running, I always say, saved my life. If it wasn't for running, I would probably be in a very dark space right now. It gave me confidence. It allowed me to find a community of people, particularly a community of other guys that I could be around. Up until that point, up until 14, I didn't have a lot of male friends around me for a variety of different reasons. Like I said, a lot of guys didn't want to be my friend because they were uncomfortable with how I embodied my masculinity, or essentially because they thought I was gay. And so I didn't really have that kind of vantage point of having like kind of guy friends around me. When I started doing athletics or track and field, for those who are in America, I started gaining a lot more kind of like male camaraderie around me, which was great for me at that time. And so I did that for about 5 years. I had hopes of going to the Olympics in 2012. And at the end of my high school career, I was a U.S. national champion, 8-time Maryland state champion, etc. I've got some pictures there. That's the New Balance. That's my team on the right when we won the Nike Nationals with the fastest time in the country. And yeah, so this was my life at the time. I had kind of transitioned from this really insecure, bullied young guy into this, track star that was going places. But the problem is I never really dealt with the issues in my life. And so everything became performance. So I had to perform for people to like me. I had to perform for people to think that I was worthy of being around them. To be honest, I was using my accolades as a way to shut people off. It was a way of saying, hey, don't look at me because I'm afraid that you're going to attack me. Look at my accomplishments. And so I was really dealing with a lot of internal issues still as I was doing all of these throughout my entire running career. And it was really challenging for me still, but I found a way to cope with it through track and field. At the end of my high school career, I got a full ride scholarship to a variety of different universities, and I ended up going to Hampton University in Virginia. And there I was still on course, and I still wanted to run in 2012 Olympics for GB, and was set on course to be doing that. But because I never really dealt with a lot of the issues from when I was younger, I started falling into a lot of depression and a variety of different mental health issues. And that led me to be introduced to drugs for the first time during my freshman year at university. And that would become the beginning of my 5-year battle with substance abuse. And so now I had, again, got to university on full ride scholarship, but still dealing with all these emotional issues that I'd never really taken care of, and I'd never really spoken to anyone about it. And then I was introduced to drugs for the first time, and literally that completely set me off. After my first year at university, I actually gave up my scholarship and dropped out of university altogether and moved all the way across the country to LA. And everyone kind of thought that I was having this, breakdown. People didn't know what was going on with me. And yeah, it was a really kind of interesting time in my life. But one I don't regret. But again, I had never really dealt with those issues. Fast forward to 2010, I am getting somewhere, so bear with me. Fast forward to 2010, I moved back to Bristol because I was pretty much not doing anything with my life at that point. My drug use actually got worse when I got here. I was still finding it challenging to work through the issues of this idea around masculinity, around sexuality, and around race as well. Throughout this time, keep in mind, I'm also living my identity as a Black man in America. So, just by proxy of being there, I'm absorbing all of these different messages of being a Black man and what that means, and what my black masculinity is supposed to look like based off TV, film, media, etc. So there's all these different kind of conversations and projections, etc., kind of all going on and being kind of like discovered and unpicked and suppressed in tandem, and so again, by the time I moved back to the UK 11 years ago now actually, I was getting even further into drugs. I almost died actually twice because that's just how much I had fallen in love with drugs, because they were helping to mask the issues that were going on with me. And so I had a very unhealthy relationship with drugs. But I knew that there was something more calling me, and I knew that I wanted to start helping people that were going through similar situations. So through the help of my brother and his girlfriend at the time, I actually got clean in 2013 and started a company that worked in men's mental health and well-being, which I shared with you all, which is what I was doing at that time. And so I created a company. It was called Milk for Tea. That was a company that I used to work for. Jennifer met me when I was working with my company Milk for Tea, which again, I was working in men's well-being. And I started working with men, helping them to realign themselves, finding their identity, value, and purpose, but also helping to spread the awareness that as men, how we act, because we carry the majority of the power in almost every industry and culture in the world, it's imperative that we also understand that how we act has a massive implication on other community groups, such as women, LGBTQ+, and a variety of other community groups. So it's really important that we are making sure that we are well, that we are making sure that we understand the different dynamics that are going on in the world, and that we are making sure that we're in alignment so that we can be so that we can make sure that we're making things more equitable within the power dynamics that are currently at hand. And so that's what I was doing for since 2014, I'd say, up until about 2020 of last year. I had a great time. I was able to meet His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Dame Helen Mirren, Rio Ferdinand, and it was a great time. I was working through the Prince's Trust, who were supporting me, who have been absolutely incredible in my beginning of my career working in this space, and I'm very thankful for them for what they were able to support me in doing. Now I'm working independently, and I can speak a little bit more about that later on, but I'm working independently, still working in the same space, just more evolved, I would say. Cool. So that brings us up to modern day. So now I want to speak about systemic inequality. So we've now have like hopefully a bit of a vantage point that we can all work from, sharing, having shared my story. So keep all that in mind. And as we move forward, we're now going to be starting to speak about systemic inequality as it comes from issues within different industries and our society as a whole. Now, systemic or structural inequality occurs when the fabric of organizations, institutions, governments, or social networks contains an embedded bias, which provides advantages for some members and marginalizes or produces disadvantages for other members. So this could be based on race, gender, class, sexual orientation, disability, etc. So again, it's what are the barriers that are created that prevent people from thriving in the same way? Now, looking at systemic inequality through the lens of intersectionality is key. We have to remember that we all carry rank in some way. Now, for instance, as a Black man, there will be hurdles to me thriving. There will be disadvantages, and I will be marginalized in a lot of areas. At the same time, I'm still a man, and that comes with certain privileges as well. And so it's recognizing all of these different types of, again, intersectional points in which we meet and which helps to create who we are as people. So for instance, someone who is a Black queer woman is going to have a variety of different disadvantages and hurdles to thriving within our society and the way that our society is made up right now. And so again, it's about us all looking at the ways in which we have privilege and the ways in which we're disadvantaged, and looking at the ways where we do have privilege, that we're making things more equitable for everyone in that space. We all play a role in some way in upholding systemic inequality, and we can all play a role in dismantling it. So it kind of links to the point of intersectionality. We all have to remember that no matter who we are, we play a role in upholding disadvantage for someone else and systemic inequality for someone else, and in other ways we may be disadvantaged at the same time. Now, the important thing to remember is that we cannot liberate ourselves and then think that we can continue to uphold systemic inequality at the same time. It doesn't work like that. I've been in spaces where I've worked particularly, for instance, with white women, and on one hand they're fighting for gender equity, and they and are fighting for the rights of women, rightfully so and thankfully so. At the same time too are completely oblivious to the ways in which they're upholding racism. And it's like they come from the same structure. It's the same energy and same structure. You cannot have one without the other. For instance, or I may work with Black men who are fighting for Black rights, but not looking at the rights of women. Again, you can't have one without the other. It is all part of the same system, and they are all overlapped and combined within this very intricate matrix of experiences, policies, legislations, etc. Now, men still carry the majority of the power in almost every culture and industry in the world, and this is what we're going to be zooming in on today. Okay, so again, there are a variety of different issues that we could be speaking about. Today, we're going to be focusing a lot more on gender. And so we're going to be zooming in on that, looking at the role that men and masculinity play in systemic inequality. Okay, so buckle up. This is not a man bashing talk. I've been in other talks, and there's been all types of stuff going on. This is not that, but what we have to look at, we have to start interrogating and investigating where some of these root causes are. We have to zoom in on that and see what work needs to be done in that. That's the role of systemic equity and social justice, is about looking at the root cause of these issues and again, beginning to work in those spaces in a variety of different ways. Again, policy and legislation will need to come in, but also collective healing and social action will need to play a role as well. And again, that's kind of just what I was speaking to. Policy and legislation need to work alongside collective healing to further progress the various cultures we live and work in. Now, what we oftentimes have right now, particularly in modern day, in 2021, we have a lot of push for policy and legislation happening, and rightfully so. And a lot of this, the historical nature of systemic equity and social justice has really been looked through the prism of policy and legislation. And that is important. We need policy and legislation to progress so that we can make things more equitable, specifically on a systemic level within workspaces, corporations, et cetera, et cetera. But if we are not also working through collective healing and healing up the energetics of inequality, then we're always going to be in the same space that we find ourselves in, Excuse me. We're always going to find that, because what you have then, you have policy and legislation being passed saying, for instance, as a Black man, I can now work or go to school with a white person. At the same time, my daily lived experience is still filled with overt racism. Again, you have not worked or shifted the energy. What you've done is you've kind of worked in one space, throughout the political sphere. You've worked in helping to make things more equitable for me on one hand. At the same time, too, you have not shifted the energetics of inequality and injustice. And that's the area of which I work mostly in. And we're going to be speaking and zooming in more on that as well. That's the space that I find myself in. Again, I work alongside people who work more in policy and legislation. My role at 31 years old is really looking at the energetics of that and how we begin shifting that. When a lot of people see a Black man walking towards them down the street, it's the energetics. It's a learned response that they feel. It's not up here, it's in here. And so we have to get out of this cerebral notion of injustice or looking at inequality from a mental or cerebral or intellectual point of view and embody it and shift that energy, because that's where it sits. Racism sits energetically within us. Sexism sits energetically within us. The thing that makes, a man thinks that he can, sexually assault a woman, down at the street, that's energetic, that's here. Again, there are mental aspects and cerebral aspects playing along, but the thing is, that is something that has to be embodied and shifted for that to change. Sexually assaulting people is already illegal. Again, now there is definitely reform that can happen so that we can tighten things up, make sure that people are getting the due amount of sentencing for that, et cetera, but it's already illegal. So again, but we're still seeing a rise in, we're still seeing people being sexually abused all the time, sexually violated all the time. And so again, it's about healing up that energetics of that injustice. So just to paint a picture of where we're at right now with some of the issues, I've just got a few stats. We're going to go through them. We won't belabor them too long. We won't dwell on them too long. And yes, the first one is 1 in 3 women worldwide have been subjected to physical or sexual violence. And that's in the UK, I believe it's 1 in 5 women who have been sexually assaulted. I think it's probably even more than that, to be honest, because we have to understand that with all of these stats, they're highly underreported as well. So worldwide, it's 1 in 3. In the UK, I think it's 1 in 5. But the reality is the majority of women have been reported to by the Guardian to have some form of sexual assault, violence, or inappropriate sexual behavior to them, whether it be on the street, through people they know, or in the workplace. Women and girls account for 99% of victims in the commercial sex industry and 58% of other sectors of forced labor. Over 40% of women in tech say they've been harassed by a boss or investor. And globally, suicide rates in men are just over twice as high as for women. So again, when we look at the state of things where we are now, it's not just women who are being impacted by that, it's also men themselves. And that's when we look at inequality, even the people who seem to have the privilege or the advantage in some ways are still losing out. And again, that's the part we need to zoom in on as well, because again, part of my abuse, and working through my abuse, which I've been doing over the past 6 or 7 months now, is recognizing that, I was brought up in a structure where a lot of things weren't expressed, weren't talked about. This patriarchal system is what actually led to my abuse. It aided and embedded in my abuse. And also the patriarchal system and the way that my family was set up also is what kept my abuser safe for so long, And so again, in my family, I'm currently working on dismantling that. And so again, we're right now in a healing process with the Edmund family right now, because I'm refusing to kind of keep that system going in my family. But as a society, we have to be working on that as well. Perfect. Suicide is the #1 leading cause of death for men under 45 in the UK. That has been that way for years. 1 in 8 men in the UK have a common mental health problem. And so again, it's starting to paint this picture that again, we are all losing out. We are all losing out when we have this system of inequity and injustice going on, and so it's not just impacting women, it's impacting men themselves, it's impacting everyone. And again, like I said, because men still carry the majority of the power in almost every industry and culture in the world, that is going to have a massive implication on other people. And so we've got to start looking at how do we actually start healing this up. I just realized that you all can see when I'm moving this bar left and right, so forgive me. I was thinking that was just me. Cool. So Beyond Blue, which is an Australian-based organization that works with mental health and suicide, did extensive research to find out what were the 3 leading factors to poor men's well-being, to men's suicide, and just kind of like ill men behavior as a whole. They came up with 3 things from their extensive research. The first one is loneliness and isolation. The second is coping mechanisms. So that could be drugs, alcohol, pornography, sex, whatever it is for them. Coping mechanisms, anything that's used to mask the real issues. And so when we look at something like as assault or abuse in any way, as terrible as it is, these are still just outward manifestations of a deeper and wider issue that we have going on. Now, the third one is what we're going to be zooming on a bit more today, the outdated views of masculinity. So Beyond Blue said that actually this is key in what keeps us, not just poor mental health, but these systemic injustices alive, are these outdated views of masculinity, these policy and legislations that protect men, these cultures that protect men. And that could be a culture within a family, that could be a culture within an organization or a company, within politics, a country, any type of culture. Every space where there are people, there is going to be a culture that has been nurtured in some way, for the better or for worse. And so again, these outdated views of masculinity is really playing a big part in exacerbating a lot of the systemic inequalities and injustices that we're seeing today. So now I'm going to speak about, just for the next probably 10 minutes or so, about things throughout the past 6 years from working with different community groups that I've found is really where we can be looking deeper into when it comes to reconstructing masculinity. Now, anytime we have deconstruction or we want to deconstruct anything, now I think, with a lot of activists and stuff like that, they're like, tear this system down, get rid of the banks, get rid of this. And I'm not for or against any of that, like I'm up for whatever makes things more equitable. I'm all up for tearing institutions down, tearing statues down, whatever, if it's gonna lead to something progressive, I'm all up for it. But anytime that you have deconstruction, that you want to deconstruct anything, you have to have reconstruction at the heart of it, or else you just have anarchy. You can tear everything down and we're just going to be left with a void that in some ways will probably be worse than where we are today. So you always must have reconstruction at the heart. So whenever we're looking at tearing something down, we always have to say, we're going to tear this down, but we're going to put this up. That has to be at the heart of everything, or else that same energy of just destruction, colonization, all of that stuff you're just exacerbating. It's the same energy, if you get what I'm saying. So we're going to speak for the next 10 minutes about some things that we can do, particularly within the male space, that can help to shift some of this energetically. Now, again, this is not looking at policy and legislation. This is looking at the individual. This is looking at us as men or as people. Again, a lot of these I think will be relatable to all people, regardless of how you, whatever gender you identify with. But again, we're honing in and zooming in on men right now in the male space because of the power structure right now. So this is really looking at what things we can do as men or people who are in relationship with men, etc., can be doing, and so it's really looking again at the energetics of this. So the first one is self-connection. Everything starts with us. That's a big part of my story that I shared with you all, recognizing that everything starts with me. If I wanted to make a change, I had to do that. It starts with me. All of my relationships start with me, the relationship I have with myself. And a lot of my story and my trajectory since I've been 4 or 5 years old has really been connecting with myself. And that has had a massive impact in a positive way on then how I engage with the wider world. But it's been about starting with myself, connecting with myself, also honing in on my identity, my value, and my purpose. Again, a lot of when I was growing up is this massive conflict and confusion around my identity. It left me going for, it's one of the things that kind of led me to doing drugs, led me to being around certain people that actually weren't healthy for me to be around. It led me to doing a lot of things, accepting inappropriate behavior, particularly by older men, because I just, I was looking for something. I was looking for a place to belong. I was looking for acceptance. I was looking for love. I was looking for affection and attention. And it led me to some very toxic and inappropriate spaces. And so really it's about honing in on our identity, finding out, what our identity, our value is as men, particularly, a lot of the men I've worked with, it's so interesting, how much they don't value themselves. And again, we, in terms of how they portray that, it doesn't come across like that. But when you start digging into it, again, there's not a lot of value there, or their value and purpose has been linked to their job, or it has been linked to these very kind of external things. So for instance, when we come into a situation like the pandemic and people are losing jobs, people are not able to kind of operate in the same way that they've been operating in, you're going to find this kind of confusion there, or this kind of tension there, because again, a lot of men have, not all, but many men, sometimes do wrap their identity and value up in a job, or their purpose up in a job. And so it's about kind of reframing that. Next one is identifying any met emotional needs. Again, it's recognizing, what am I looking for? Again, like I just said, my desire to kind of have male friends and kind of healthy, friends in my life. Again, because I did not understand the emotional needs that I had due to the way I was brought up, due to the way that I was bullied through school. Again, it led me to really seeking out validation in some very dangerous places. And so again, when we identify the unmet emotional needs that we have, we can begin filling them in healthier ways. Lastly, be conscious of repressed emotions that can manifest themselves. I'll move this out the way, sorry. Can manifest themselves in other ways. It's interesting when we look at social media, for instance, or we look on Twitter, where the abuse towards women is far greater than the abuse towards men. And again, it's like seeing this almost this unconscious, these unconscious and repressed emotions that are coming out. So on one level, we see this abuse towards women. And again, men don't even understand the energetics as to why they're feeling this way. Why are you so triggered that a woman is promoting her business? Why are you so triggered that a woman is fighting for her own equity and justice? Why are you so triggered? But again, you haven't done that work to understand why you feel the way that you do. And that's leading to you then going to abuse a woman online or abuse a woman in real life. Again, but it's not being conscious of what's going on energetically for that person. Just doing a time check. Perfect. Platonic male connection. Again, one of the biggest detriments to men's emotional well-being is that many believe all their intimacy is supposed to come from women. And this has been a big one here. What we have within the male community, not everyone, but many, is that we have a real disconnect of that kind of deep platonic male intimacy. Men being able to, build healthy communities with each other, healthy relationships with each other. And a lot of that is because we cannot engage healthy with each other. Forget trying to engage healthily with other community groups. A lot of men don't have healthy connections with themselves first and foremost, or even with each other. So again, by the time we get to engaging with other community groups outside the male community, again, that disconnection is just getting, exacerbated more and more. And one of the things I've found as well is that, again, when I look at a lot of relationships that are in my life, whether it's through my parents' relationship, through my friends' relationships, or et cetera, again, a lot of the emotional labor ends up getting put on the women. And so again, that's not every dynamic, that's not every relationship, but for many, I would say, women end up doing the majority of the emotional labor in a relationship. And again, that puts a lot of pressure on that, and so again, it's about balancing that out as men, finding out what we can do for our own emotional well-being and becoming more emotionally intelligent ourselves. And again, that will unequivocally have a positive impact, not just on how we engage and think about ourselves, but how we engage with other people. Again, the depth of connection with others reflects the depth of connection we have with ourselves. We can only go as deep with others as deep as we've gone with ourselves. The only way that I can even do a lot of the speaking that I've done is because I've done a lot of the internal work myself, and again, when I do talks or anything like that, it's just a reflection of the work that I've done with myself, first and foremost. And that's where it all has to start. We have to give ourselves as men permission to build rich emotional landscapes with each other. And as a society, we have to be giving men that opportunity as well, again, in healthy ways, and cultivate a healthy community for men to support each other as well. And we're going to get onto that a little bit later on as well. But when we build healthy community, again, it's not just a way that we can support each other and inspire each other, but healthy community is also a way that we can challenge each other, because that's also what we're seeing a lack of. We're seeing a lack of men calling other men out. We're seeing a lack of men challenging each other or doing anything when we see injustices and inequality happening, because that is the culture that a lot of us have grown up in, or the cultures of a company that are being exacerbated by their senior management or whoever is in there. Again, we need healthy community. Again, it's not just a place to be inspired and feel good. It's a place to be challenged and to be able to be called out in healthy ways. Again, trust. Without trust, it's challenging to build deeper relationships with ourselves and others. It just can't happen. Trust allows us to feel loved, cared for, and safe. Any collective equity work needs trust. If you're working in a company and you're trying to change it, you're not going to get very far if the people that are involved in this this work do not trust each other. You're not going to get very far if the people who are working, the team members, don't trust management. You're not going to get very far. You have to create and facilitate an environment of trust, and that takes time. You know, and any community, any company, any space that you're in, you have to cultivate a culture of trust. And again, that takes time. Intentionality. I'm gonna move this over here. Intentionality. Substantial personal growth doesn't happen by accident, not at all. You do not just wake up and become self-actualized. Sometimes that does happen. You can have a moment and you just wake up and it's great. But usually that is going to be because you've been doing some work already. You know, you have to be intentional about this work, any type of work, no matter who you are, whatever gender you identify with. You have to be intentional about doing this work. Systemic equity, systemic justice does not happen by accident. We have to be intentional about looking at ourselves, the role that we play in upholding these inequalities. And then we have to be intentional about using our privilege within these different spaces to make the space more equitable for everyone in them. Educating ourselves, but again, not just educating ourselves because that keeps it all cerebral. We have to start embodying it and actually taking action. Some are willing, some aren't. That is one thing over the past 6 years I have realized. I've worked with many different companies. I've worked with individuals. I've worked with charities. Many people say that they want change, but in all reality, they do not want to see this change. Because, and I'll get companies that call me, email me and call me up sometimes and say, Daniel, we're really looking to make things more diverse and inclusive here at D&I. First of all, D&I is not going to solve all your troubles and problems within a company. The reality is so many companies have been built on so much inequity that, to be honest, you really have to dismantle your company and rebuild it, and to actually get it to be any type of to be equitable in any way, in any really meaningful way. Now, you can reform. Again, that doesn't have to be a complete dismantling at the same time. You can start dismantling one bit, putting it up another bit, then you can start taking down something else and putting that back up so the operation can still keep going. But again, most companies aren't really wanting to do that real deep work. It's a lot of it has been tick box exercises, lip service. And it's the same thing when we look at people. Again, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, reading books, that's all great. It's great to educate ourselves. That's the first step. We have to educate ourselves, but we have to go beyond that. But again, that's the point. That's kind of where people meet their edge, when you start asking them to go beyond just understanding something on a cerebral level. But at the same time, you do not need everyone on board to manifest change. You do not. Again, that's not actually how culture changing works. I don't think a lot of change works like that. You as someone who get there. So for instance, I'll kind of paint a picture for my family right now. In terms of my family right now, I come from a very, very big family on both sides, my mother and my father. There are probably about a quarter to maybe half of us who are intentionally engaged in the healing of our family. About a quarter or a half. There are probably two people who are probably intentionally not engaged, like they're choosing to not engage. And the others I say are probably neutral, as they're not opposed to it, but actually are they really fully engaged? Not really. The reality is all you need are the people who want to start engaging and start doing this work. That's all you need to begin with. You don't need to get everyone on board. You work with the people who do want to do this, who are going to be intentional about it, and you will see the fruits of that work manifested in some way. You will, because you're shifting the energetics, you're shifting the culture of that space. Regardless of what the people over there are doing, you're going to begin to shift the culture. And a lot of those people who are just neutral will start coming over and being like, actually, I'm seeing this change. I'm feeling this change. I want to get on board. And then hopefully what you'll do is the people who are actually intentionally opposed to it, are they going to come over and start doing the work right away? No. But if you can move them over from being intentionally opposed to just being neutral, that is progress. That's great progress, and then you just work on getting them closer and closer over to being intentionally involved in the healing process, in the systemic equity process, the systemic justice work in a way that is meaningful and also showing up with integrity. That is really important. But again, we have to get out of this idea that we have to get everyone on board all at the same time, all at the same level. If that was the case, we wouldn't do anything. There would be nothing happening at all. So again, if you're working in a company and you want to see change, find your allies, build that team first, and you start working through that, start working on that. Of course, if you get buy-in from senior management or other forms of management, that will definitely help, of course. But again, start replicating and start doing that work yourself. And again, you will start seeing some fruit manifested. And of course, there's a lot of different things that go into that as well. That's a very kind of top level culture changing strategy there. But we can speak a little bit about that later on if you want to. Perfect. Community. We are all built for community. You know, we need community. As people, we are built genetically. It's in our DNA for community. Trust builds connection. Connection builds community. Healthy community is not only a safe place to inspire and encourage each other, but a safe space to challenge and hold each other accountable. That is key. We have to create spaces that we can, again, we can challenge each other, we can inspire each other, but again, the accountability, that's what we're seeing a lack of. People holding themselves accountable and people holding each other accountable in a way that's loving, in a way that's kind, in a way that's compassionate. It can still be firm. I am someone who is very firm when it comes to equity. I'm very firm of where I stand. I'm very firm of what I allow and what I don't allow. But everything I have done has to be done in compassion. It has to be done with reconstruction at the heart of it. If I'm just looking to set fire and scorch earth everywhere around me, now don't get me wrong, there's a time for that. I'm all up for scorching earth. That's part of the process. That is definitely part of the process. And I don't allow anyone to demonize scorching earth, because that is a part of the process sometimes. But what we can't do is just scorch the whole earth and sit and watch it burn and not do anything else. We've got to have the heart of reconstruction, the heart of reconciliation, the heart for really rebuilding more equitable and just more equitable structures and structures that are going to work for all of us, not just the select few. All right. Healthy community helps us become aware of our blind spots. I am not perfect. I am still working through a lot of different stuff. I'm still on my gender equity journey. I'm still on a lot of different journeys right now. And thankfully, I've had so many people around me who have been able to highlight and reflect some spots that I did not see. You know, I'm just living my life and I don't see that over here. Like, actually, Daniel, you've got, like, that's some sexist behavior there, Daniel. That's some sexist ideology there. You know, and we have to have a community that can do that in a way that, okay, it's like, cool, I can understand that, I can better that, and I can move on from it. And again, one of the things about social media is that it doesn't really facilitate that type of progress and that type of movement. You know, cancel culture is a big topic right now, et cetera, et cetera. There are sometimes people just do need to be cut off. Again, that's just it. There are people that just do. But at the same time, too, we have to, what space are we giving for people to evolve? And again, it's a really beautiful dance that you have to, and balance you have to have with that. But again, we have to find out a better way, I think, as in a mainstream way of allowing people to evolve and learn and grow while still holding them accountable. Healthy community magnifies our greatest qualities. If you're in a space where you do not feel like your qualities are being magnified, you're feeling insecure around people, you're feeling like you're not good enough, that is not healthy community. You know, the community is going to be challenging at times, but you should be feeling, your qualities should be getting magnified. You should be becoming more confident, you know, with the people that you have around you, you know, not less confident, not more insecure. No, we want to feel more confident. We want to feel like we are progressing with the people we have around us. And that goes for the companies that we work in as well. We're almost there. I'm bringing it home. There we go. I'm moving this out of the way. Emotional healing. Heal the boy and the man will appear. That is one of the quotes I've taken on for my life. You know, so many of the issues I've had in my adult life stemmed from when I was younger. And again, when we start working on the healing, that emotionally healing, you know, and again, that can look a lot of different ways. Talk therapy is a great way. It is not the only way of healing. Counseling and therapy is not the only way. I highly support and advocate for talk therapy, whether that's through therapy, counseling, but there are a variety of other ways that you can heal emotionally, okay? And so again, it's about healing up the energetics. I use that word a lot, but it's healing up what you can't see. It's the invisibility of injustice. It's the invisibility of wounding, emotional wounding. You know, at the crux of all of these social issues, whether it's sexual human trafficking, whether it's racism towards Black and brown people, whether it's violence towards women, whether it's, you know, even the gender pay gap, whatever it may be, climate change, at the heart of it lies wounded people. And over the 6 years I've been working in this space, that is what is true for every community group I've gone to, whether it's white working class people, white middle class people, you know, the Asian community, Black community, wherever I've done work in the Arab world. At the heart of it is wounded people. And that is what we have to get to. You know, we have to get to the root cause of these issues. Now, we also need to be fighting the symptoms, because sometimes the symptoms are really impacting people's day-to-day lives. Again, a police officer continuing to systematically kill off Black people, that's a problem. We've got to start working on a symptom, but that is not the root cause. You know, we've got to get to the root cause of these things as well. They have to work in tandem. People who are going to be fighting and working towards bettering the symptoms, and then those of us who are going to get to the root cause of these issues. And from my personal and professional perspective, that comes with a lot of emotional healing. We've got to heal this up. Right. Lastly, progress takes time. You know, it's a very annoying thing that I've had to learn as I've gotten older. You don't have to work on everything at the same time either. You know, if we worked on every aspect of ourselves all at the same time, we would literally just like implode. You know, there's no way we can work on everything all at the same time. But again, it's about being intentional about the things that we're working on and finding out, okay, cool, I've kind of reached my edge with this. I'm going to kind of sit with this, meditate on this, and kind of live this out. And then I'm going to carry on some more. So there's nothing wrong with taking some, some rest, some breaks, and then recognizing that, but they have to be intentional breaks. Like, okay, I'm not going to watch any more documentaries on climate change. I'm just actually going to live this out and start implementing what I've learned. And then you do that for a while, and then you get back into learning, educating, and absorbing more and working through that. Again, be patient with yourself and with other people. That's really important too. This is teamwork. Systemic equity is not going to be solved by one person, one company, one organization, or even one group of people. We have to be able to work with each other, across community groups. We've got to be able to do that. We've got to be able to hold space for each other and understand the different vantage points that people are coming to the table with. And again, it doesn't excuse the behavior. It just explains some of the behavior. And so we have to be conscious of that and recognize that we're all coming from different vantage points. We're all coming from different mindsets and backgrounds, and finding out how do we make this work so that, again, this is more equitable for everyone involved. Lastly, this is one of our biggest challenges: social equity, systemic equity, social justice, systemic justice, equity for all people, regardless of your race, gender, sexual orientation, faith, non-faith, disability, etc. This is one of our biggest human challenges. It has been probably since not since the very beginning, but very close to the very beginning, but it's also one of our greatest opportunities. And this is what excites me. Yes, it can be very bleak sometimes. And I think Jennifer spoke to that very well at the beginning of this conversation. It is bleak sometimes. When you recognize how much injustice and inequality there is in the world, it is very bleak sometimes. The more I understand, the more I learn, the more I'm just like, wow, wow, the levels and layers to this is just astounding. And the levels of delusion and denial from so many people, governments, etc., it's just astounding. But within every great challenge lies so much great opportunity. And again, engaging in social equity work, engaging in social justice work or social action work, you have to have that hope that things can get better. Because if we don't believe things can get better, there's no point of us working at this. There's no point of us coming here and thinking that we can change things if we don't actually believe we can. We've got to believe that we can do this because things have been done already. And right now, I believe it's our time right now in terms of this generation and those of us who are here engaged in this work, intentional about this work, who are engaged with integrity and wanting to see things change. It's our time right now to do the best we can to progress human civilization that bit much more, and we may only get a few more steps ahead, but again, then we pass the baton off to the next. And so right now it's our time. I believe, we were made for a time like this, and I feel really powerful and grounded in the space that I find myself in now. When I look at, different people, when I look at young people, when I look at the work that's happening in a variety of different spaces. Yes, there's a lot of bad stuff going on and stuff that's, being done intentionally to oppose this work and to slow down this work and stop this work altogether. But the fight will never end. And there's some great work that is happening amongst all of that chaos. So a last question to leave you off with, and I think we will have a little bit of time for that discussion. What is one thing you can commit to doing to improve the equity within your organization? Just one thing that you can commit to. It could be going out and educating yourself on a certain topic, listening to a podcast, or, having that conversation with your line manager, having that conversation with your colleague, just, apologizing to your partner. It could be anything. Not your partner, to your colleague, apologizing to your colleague, whatever it is for you that you think you can commit to, just one thing, no matter how big or small. What's one thing you can commit to doing that says, actually, I can do this today or tomorrow or this week, next week, I can do this, and again, it doesn't have to be something grandiose, something small that you can just say, this is one step I'm going to take towards making my organization more equitable.